Thanks, guys. I don't need to introduce myself now because I did it before and now you got another one. In addition to what Dave said, my undergraduate work was primarily in human development and family life studies. So a lot of my research usually goes right back to human development and family life using developmental psychology as opposed to just psychology, where I look at the lifespan and how everything from the prenatal phase to aging and adulthood impacts us. So keep that in mind. So what am I going to focus on and what am I not going to focus on? There's a number of perspectives that come at you in relation to sexuality and pornography. What I am not here to do is to forbid you from porn use or condemn you for porn use or any other type of sexual interactions which you choose to participate in. My role in my research and my presentation and the messages that I want to portray to you is to illuminate the innate need for sexuality and seeking out healthy sexual relationships and what that looks like. And even more specifically, I focus on women to better understand their sexuality and the environments in which female sexuality thrives. So, human connection and attachment. By a raise of hand, how many of you have learned about attachment theory in psych? Okay, good. Okay, so attachment theory, as you know, has 4 main categories, 3 of which are problematic, 1 of which is optimal, right? So you have anxious, avoidant, and ambivalent, which are problematic. And what happens is, as John Bowlby said from England, you guys all know he created attachment theory, right? He said that every single human being needs a secure attachment to their primary care provider, ideally being their mother. He never talks about the father being the most important. He never talks about the nanny being the most important. He talks about the mother. The reason for that is because the mother is the one that carries the child in utero, nurses the child ideally, that doesn't always happen, and usually spends a significant amount of the time on the child rearing. Now, I know that's not exactly how it plays out, but from a psychology model, that is ideal for a child to develop a secure attachment. And so throughout childhood, what we are trying to do as human beings and what is our parents' responsibility is to foster an environment in which we can have a healthy attachment, right? So that we can go on to live successful and happy lives and feel secure in our surroundings, right? And so if we don't develop that secure attachment, we develop anxious, avoidant, and ambivalent types of connections, and we'll struggle later on to develop secure attachments to a partner in the future, as well as struggle to engage with the world around us. Bowlby said that humans need human connection in this type of attachment to succeed in life, to exist. We need other humans. We cannot exist independently without anybody else. So from infancy to adulthood, right, linking back to human development is what I focus on, how attachment focus shifts from attachment to the mother through emotional and physical intimacy to sexuality and pair bonding. So ideally, when we leave our home and as we're entering into adolescence, we're trying to detach that connection that we formed with our mothers, and we're trying to find a mate, a pair bond. So that's achieved through sexuality in order to achieve pair bonding. And sexuality is the vehicle by which we can move and shift our home relations with our mother into a secure pair bonding experience. Humans need to achieve secure and sexual emotional attachment, just like they needed to in childhood, to optimally exist. Again, everyone's not going to experience secure attachment at all phases of life, especially when you're in between, moving and separating away from your mother, your parent, your primary care provider, and moving into finding a mate. You're going to have a period of instability where you're not going to feel completely secure. But the goal is to identify individuals or an individual that you want to seek out to have that secure attachment with and use your sexuality to bond with that individual so that you can have a secure attachment. So who's familiar with Erikson's 8 stages of development? Okay, most of you, okay. This is another highly grounded human development theory, but has been well established in psychology as well. And I didn't list all of the stages here, but I want to talk about the most important one as it relates to our sexuality. And that's the stage between the ages of 21 to 39. This is where we're mitigating if we're going to experience intimacy or isolation. And the result, if we're able to successfully complete that stage of life, is to feel love from an individual partner who can provide for us the safety of that secure attachment. Does that make sense? Okay. So intimacy and commitment. Human beings are constantly trying to maintain or obtain healthy attachment throughout the stages of development. It's all we think about, right? Everyone's always thinking about sex, right? It's a huge part of our life. Forming connections, dating, finding the one. It consumes the majority of our time. There's barriers, though, to secure attachment in childhood, right? Physical separation, emotional anxiety, neglect, having caretakers that are not stable, having a set of parents that might not get along. There's so many different ways that you can talk about the insecure attachment that could take place. But then into adulthood, there's also barriers to sexual emotional attachment in adulthood. And those barriers are non-monogamy, pornography use, commitment, or non-commitment, and non-contractual relationships. There's a lot of trends, there's a lot of things that we talk about in sexuality, in education, in academia, and that's good. We want to illuminate that people have different experiences and that people struggle in different ways and that people identify in different ways, but we also have to recognize that there are certain templates that are more successful for optimal existence and for our seeking out successful connections and attachments in life. So we're going to go into that as well. Oxytocin. Who knows what oxytocin is? Oxytocin is? Okay, so some of you. So some of you know what oxytocin is. As adults, the most powerful way to rewire our secure attachments from childhood attachments to adult attachments is by way of oxytocin. Oxytocin is the love hormone that sends the signal to the body and the brain that attachment is occurring. So what happens when oxytocin is released? When oxytocin is released, whatever stimulus is before you, be it a human, a computer screen, a book, your hand, whatever it is, it's telling your brain that you want to pair with that stimulus, that you are attaching and that a love connection is forming. When a mom and baby are together, when the mom is carrying a baby prenatally, oxytocin is being released. When a mother gives birth, the largest explosion of oxytocin is released, resulting in a feeling of love and bonding. When a mother is nursing her child, her baby, the oxytocin chemical is released, forming a bond between the mother and child. This is one of the most powerful chemical bonds that can be created with the mother and child. Again, not every circumstance is ideal. Not all mothers can nurse their children. However, nature has provided a mechanism by which our bodies and our minds can recognize when powerful connections are taking place and when we want to bond with an individual like a mother and a child. So, oxytocin is also released when? When we're having sex, when we feel aroused, when we experience an orgasm. The body is being told in that instance that you are wanting to bond with whatever stimulus that is, be it a porno, be it a human, be it a thought. When this happens, who's familiar with Pavlov? Okay. When this happens, something called classical conditioning takes place, just as Pavlov taught. You're conditioning your mind to salivate, to desire, to want that situation to reoccur that brought that pleasure. Just like Pavlov's experiment with the dog and the steak. You're conditioning your mind that whatever stimulus is before you, you're telling your mind to wire yourself to be attracted to whatever it is, to want to bond with whatever it is. And so you build these habits in your body that are wired into yourself saying, this is what I want. So we're going to talk about the need to be very clear, specific, and strategic about what stimuluses you put before you so that you do have agency over your sexuality. Because when we mindlessly go after sexual pleasures, we are taking agency away from ourselves because we're hardwiring our bodies and our brains to whatever stimulus that is. So what is porn? This is one of the most disagreed on definitions in research today, I would argue, because that's my space. Porn. Some people think porn is the Michelangelo statue in Rome. Some people think porn is a naked woman posing before an artist. Some people think porn is someone half clothed. But porn, by the definition we're using today, and by the definition that I believe is intended in research, is anything that intends to incite arousal in such a way that it results in you not only becoming aroused, but wanting to or being compelled to masturbate, have sex, whatever that might be, whatever stimulus you might be going after. And so porn definitely, that definition of porn definitely leaves it highly subjective. Something that's porn for one might not be porn for another in that instance. So there are some people that might say, hey, the Michelangelo statue is pornographic. So I would say to them, if that is pornographic for you, then close your eyes as you're walking down Rome. Artificial bonding and oxytocin disrupted. Porn is an artificial stimulus. It cannot be found in the natural environment. When we go to access porn, oxytocin is released. Whether or not we're attracted to what is in the actual content of porn, whether it's literature, ladies, whether it's photographs, whether it's videos, the content that is meant to sexually arouse will trigger a chemical response in you. And so if you're not attracted to whatever stimulus is engaged in the pornography, it might still cause you to experience arousal and cause you to want to masturbate. The body cannot distinguish the difference. All your body knows is that the release is happening and the uptake of oxytocin. The reason why porn is problematic is because artificial stimuli deceive the brain into thinking secure attachment and bonding has taken place. It's your natural instinct within your chemistry saying, I am bonding, I am seeking that secure attachment which helps me to survive in the world within which I exist. So the brain begins to associate and classically condition itself to find more comfort in porn than in human relations. Does that mean that you can't have relationships and look at porn? Absolutely not. I'm sure the majority of you know that that's not true. You can definitely have a relationship, a happy and good relationship. However, you might find more comfort when immediately turning to porn that can quickly satisfy whatever replacement you're needing for that secure attachment without needing to turn to your human partner or your potential human partner in order to build that secure attachment, which takes work. Just like the infant mother bond takes work. It takes a lot of time out of her day. She's going multiple times to nurse that baby. She's going multiple times to tend to that baby when they're crying. The same thing happens with adults. You need constant interaction. You need constant working through the relationship in order to build that secure bond. And when you're turning to porn for that artificial stimulation, you're disrupting that bonding that's supposed to take place between two human beings. So porn constructed. So why is porn more problematic for women than for men? This is really interesting because a lot of the research doesn't talk about this. This just came about from the research I was doing with women in problematic pornography use. And what we found was that the majority of the women in this study were turning to erotica. Now, we've talked about erotica, we've talked about romance novels, we've talked about 50 Shades of Grey. That is not what erotica is to these women that are using it and claiming that it is pornography. Pornography to them is a very short literature piece that goes from 0 to 1,000 very quickly and goes from romance, emotion, to orgasm in a matter of 30 seconds. And what happens within that porn is that it's not only vivid and visual, and they're reading it. Remember, it's not a video, it's not a photograph, it's literature. And so what's happening in that moment is it's highly fused with different emotional components that women might be seeking out in a relationship. And so what happens is that for women, they're not only bonding with the erotic components of the literature, they're also bonding with this emotional ideal portrayed within that. And there's a lot of movement on the porn industry side that's working to make more videos or photographs that are a lot more emotionally entangled for women because they know that that's what women want and that's what women are receptive to. And when you mix the two, it's a lot more difficult because for men are a lot better at compartmentalizing. This is cognitive development here. Men have an ability to separate a lot easier than women do. Women highly fuse emotion with sexuality, whereas men use sexuality in order to confirm the integrity of the relationship. And we'll talk more about that. Do you guys remember the evolution lecture about a week ago where we talked about how men are more upset by the idea that their partner might be physically cheating versus emotionally? And for women, it was a lot more important that they were not being emotionally cheated on. Now think about that study and that research and all of the subsequent research that validates those claims, and think about womanhood. Think about how highly fused women are to emotions. And I'm not talking about tears. I'm not talking about getting feisty. I'm not talking about those types of emotions. I'm talking about intricate interactions that for a woman stimulate arousal and bring confirmation of the quality of the relationship. That's important to women. That has been tested over many studies, not even specifically to sexuality, but within pornography, it becomes a lot more entangled. Now, and it's also not to say that for men, porn isn't just as harmful or less harmful. It's saying that men think differently and women need to be aware of why certain types of porn are appealing to them and what's happening to them as they're viewing porn and how it diminishes their ability to have a higher quality relationship with a future or current partner. So hookup culture in porn and the disabling of women's sexuality. So we talked about hookup culture when Miss Wade came, Dr. Wade came, and how the culture is not physiologically constructed to allow women to have optimal sex experiences, right? So hookup culture is centered around male pleasure. It's centered around what men want. And no one asks the question of what women want. Women mold themselves around what they think a man wants. And it totally disables their sexuality because women are reporting little to zero orgasms within hookup culture. Pornography provides artificial stimuli experience that is not catered to individuality or complexities of partner relationships. So what if porn evolves? What if porn becomes more intricate and really meets the needs of relationships and individuals? I say that's impossible. That's impossible because as we know, the 8 stages of development in Erickson were completely shifting over time, and we're constantly navigating the waters of resulting in a higher optimal state within each stage of development. And not only are we doing that for ourselves, we're doing that hopefully with a partner, with other human beings. And it is impossible for porn to act as a vehicle for that type of communication throughout the lifespan. Individuals and relationships are complex. Porn and hookup culture provide immediate and artificial fixes for an integral and lifelong human need, secure sexual and emotional attachment. As we know from the Harlow monkey studies, everyone knows Harlow monkey studies? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, some of you. As we know from the Harlow monkey studies, that a metal fake mother wrapped in a towel will never result in a monkey having a secure attachment with their mother. Likewise, pornography and hookup culture will never result in a human being having a secure human sexual attachment. These constructs desensitize one's attraction template and ability to discern authentic instances of oxytocin release, which tells the brain that a secure attachment is forming. It confuses the mind and body and results in isolation instead of intimacy. Female sexual potential. How many in this room know that women have more sexual stimulators in the vulva than men do in the penis? Awesome. They do. Women can also have more orgasms in 1 hour than men can in an hour. Men have a refractory period. Yet, women are reporting the lowest rates of orgasms in marriages and outside of marriages. Solution to porn. So, sex education throughout time has failed us. This is an area that I spent a lot of time in, studying the history of sex education. Sex education has focused primarily on a model as sex as a means to procreate or as animalistic urges. It fails to address the innate desire of humanity to better understand how to experience sexual pleasure and with whom, and how this impacts every other area of our life. Again, we talk about sex all the time. We seek out sex all the time. We seek out relationships all the time. Yet we're not talking about that all the time in our classrooms, in our sex education. It's become a very sterile topic that's talked about from very polarized and political views. Porn is popular because it focuses solely on sexual pleasure, the key ingredient sex education has ignored throughout time. Porn in its current form is used to artificially meet our sexual needs because it taps into a fundamental need of humanity to be sexually connected and understood via pleasure. Humans want more than sterile sex ed or artificial porn. Humans want to be sexually understood and to sexually understand each other within a secure attachment. Our sexuality is our most vulnerable form of communication. It is one of our deepest desires to be sexually understood, to experience sexual pleasure or joy, and to do so in a secure environment with someone we know that will honor and respect us. Equity in sexuality. Women use sex as an emotional and physiological experience. Orgasm is the destination that aims to secure attachment. For women, it's the journey, it's the process, the entire part of feeling loved, feeling secure, being sensual with their partner, feeling sought after. That is the process by which women are able to attain the highest orgasms and feel that secure attachment. Remember, orgasm really means feeling secure attachment, fulfilling that innate biological evolutionary need to feel connected. For men, sex is a physical experience that confirms that a secure emotional attachment exists. Men need a secure emotional attachment just as much as women do. However, for men, the way they find out if they're being secure in a relationship is by experiencing the sexual pleasure within that relationship. So as you can see, both men and women biologically have the same goal in mind. They both want to feel loved unconditionally. They both want to feel sexual pleasure unconditionally. They both want to be understood sexually unconditionally, but they have different processes by which they get to that point. And so no, men are not just barbarians because they want physical sex all the time. And women are not prudes because they can't achieve an orgasm just as fast as men can. They have different processes, and the man complements the woman in that process. The woman's able to ensure this emotional quality within the sexual experience, while the man is able to constantly trigger the need for physical connection throughout the relationship. He is ensuring that that secure attachment is going to be worked on all the time. So now what? Where to go from here? Women must ensure that their mate can meet emotional requirements in order to provide for offspring and quality of the relationship. But in 2019, can we transcend evolutionary biology and demand emotional conditions are met so that women can have the most optimal sexual experience and produce offspring and not be limited to achievement of the latter? 2, there are 3 conditions that need to be met, just as they need to be met in childhood, they need to be met in adulthood, in order for secure attachment, which leads to better sex and orgasm for women. The first is authentic emotional and physical understanding and communication of women's emotional and physical needs. Women need to know that they can express themselves emotionally and physically and tell their partner what they need out of the relationship without fear of repercussions, without fear of being abandoned, without fear that that individual will no longer care for them. Number 2, monogamy. Just as in childhood, the majority of individuals need to have a primary attachment. Just as in childhood, individuals need the primary attachment with their mother in order to develop a secure attachment. Adult human beings need to develop a secure attachment to one human being that can care after their individual needs and have a compatible and complementary relationship. Number 3, contractual partnership or marriage. Amy Moore's, that I think all of you have heard from, right, talks about the need in relationships for partners to mitigate the terms of their relationship and do so in a contractual type of way. And when those commitments are honored, individuals have the highest rates of satisfaction. As it pertains specifically to our sexuality and for sexual pleasure, individuals, obviously you don't want to enter into contract relationship every single time you're in a relationship, right? But ideally, you'll spend the majority of your early adulthood looking for that one individual that will be able to care after your emotional and physical needs while still relying on that primary care attachment. But once you find the individual, that you use your agency to decide this is the one that I want to choose to use my oxytocin stores with, to bond with, because they're good enough that I can separate from my mother now and engage in a relationship with them. At that point, once you are certain that that is the person, you need to enter into contractual monogamous relationship with them, ideally marriage. When you enter into a marriage contract, you are entering into one of the most secure relationships, if honored to the emotional integrity it deserves and physical integrity. You're entering into a contract that already has for you special components that ensure security. You know that individual shares finances with you because it's in the contract. You know that individual won't leave you because it's in the contract. You know when you're fat after you have a baby, they're not going to leave you because it's in the contract. That contract is everything. That contract matters. You would not go into a housing program or apartment building without signing a contract because there's no value into having this free-for-all relationship within a rental arrangement because you don't know when you're going to get kicked out. You don't know if you can stay. You don't know if the price is going to change. There's no security. You're not going to enter into a business relationship. You're not going to invest in a business venture unless you have a contract because it ensures the integrity of the relationship. Likewise, why aren't we focusing on doing this with our most important relationship, the relationship that's going to result in our secure attachment and help us in all other areas in our life? That marriage contract is everything. It helps you achieve the best orgasms because you have that emotional security. You know they're going to be there for you. Now, I recognize there are a lot of marriages that are completely flawed, that are not living to the integrity of their relationship. But at least you have a framework to work with. 3, women have the biological hardwiring to be stewards over the emotional quality of the relationship. But what women are rarely told is that by practicing this stewardship under specific conditions, as we noted in number 2, they can also have the most optimal sex life and achieve orgasms unfeigned, all while achieving a secure adult attachment that results in favorable outcomes throughout the lifespan. The interesting part about all of this is that women are rarely told these circumstances by which their sexuality thrives. And when women are able to safeguard these conditions under which their sexuality thrives, men's sexuality also thrives. There's also a lot of research to show that men, while viewing porn, look at the women and their faces at times to see if they're experiencing sexual pleasure. Now, what this tells me is no, don't watch porn with your husband or your partner, but what it tells me is that men care when their women are experiencing pleasure. In hookup culture as well, we talked about how men, once they move into a committed relationship, their women experience more orgasms. The men seem to care a lot more once they're in committed relationships about the woman's pleasure. So I'm going to play a video for you guys. I like this video. Who knows this video? It's a good one. Now, this video, every single piece isn't perfect. I don't condone it as like the perfect model for a relationship. I don't know. if there's anything within it that might not be ideal for one individual or another. But I want you to notice, as you watch this video, I want you to notice the different references within the video. The singer talks about disability, how one day his fingers won't work. Will he still be loved? He talks about when I'm old, will you still love me because of what I look like? The interesting thing about this video is it's highly sexualized. He's dancing with another individual who's in like a corset of some sort. And the very interesting thing about this video is that sexuality is entangled within these ideals, and it's symbolically showing us the power of sexuality during youth to bond two individuals to a point where when they're older, when they don't have the attributes that were initially attractive, that won't matter. And that's a powerful thing. Because if you can use sexuality as a vehicle to achieve not only pleasure, but to achieve a lifelong companionship that can result in your secure attachment, you will optimally thrive in all of your environments. Uh-oh. We'll get it. Oh, thank you.
And I can't sweep you off of your feet. Will your mouth still remember the taste of my love? Will your eyes still smile from your cheek? Darling, I will be loving you till we're 70. And baby, my heart could still fall as hard at 23. And I'm thinking about how people fall in love in mysterious ways. Maybe just a touch of a hand. Well, me, I fall in love with you every single day. And I just wanna tell you I am. So honey, now take me into your loving arms. Kiss me under the light of 1,000 stars. Place your head on my beating heart. I'm thinking out loud, maybe we found love right where we are. When my hair's all but gone and the memory fades, and the crowds don't remember my name. When my hands don't play the strings the same way, I know you will still love me the same. 'Cause honey, your soul could never grow old, it's evergreen. Baby, your smile forever in my mind and memory. I'm thinking about how people fall in love in mysterious ways. And maybe it's all part of right where we are. And we found love right where we are.
That's it. Instagram handle right there. I cover topics all the time. This is my personal one. I cover topics all the time related to sexuality, talking to your children about sexuality, and women and healthy sexuality for women. Questions? Anyone?
So it seemed like from what we were talking about is the problem with porn arises when people are using it like instead of human interaction, and like the oxytocin only like is released in the brain like at home, like in front of the screen. But what do you think about like couples who use porn together, and then that like could that be part of the like bonding work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So couples in pornography is a whole different realm, and I'm familiar with a lot of the literature on that. I would say probably couples using porn together maybe is a step up from using it individually, but there's still a lot of problematic components within that as well. I think it's something that you definitely have to really think about, and I think the research is evolving in that area. For the time being, where pornography is at, the intention that pornography has, what pornography does to the brain and the wiring, there's still going to be a lot of components in it that infringe upon your agency to develop your own attraction template. And so that's where I think it's problematic. But pornography use is problematic for people on different levels. There's some people that are more prone to having addictions where pornography becomes extremely problematic. And there's some people that are able to separate a little bit better. And so like I said, I don't necessarily want to move in a direction where I condemn people for using it across the board, but I would caution everyone to be extremely careful, because you want to make agency-based choices about what you're putting into your brain and your body and how you're wiring yourself.
I have a quick question. So when you were talking about how like one of the ways you can like condition, you can optimize like basically your life is by creating like this contractual, understanding. But there definitely are people who are like perfectly happy not being in a marriage. Maybe they're in a relationship, or maybe they're not looking for that at all. So I guess like what are your considerations about that?
My considerations for that are exactly what you said. People, if they feel so strongly that that's where they want to be, then that's their choice. What I'm presenting to you are the conditions where sexuality thrives, typically. Like everything in research, no matter what you read, it's not going to be 100% applicable to every single individual on the planet. But it is important as a researcher, as a developmental psychologist, as someone, how most of you here in the room are going to some sort of psychology-related field, to consider the majority and what is most optimal for the majority of people. And there are answers that are optimal for most people. Most people need a heck ton of sunlight and vitamin D, but there's some people that can probably survive without that much, and so likewise for these situations. So my greatest concern is that a lot of the times we have speakers and researchers come in and they're presenting to us marginalized groups that maybe thrive in those situations, and what happens is that we hear that and we think, oh, that applies to me. And what I'm saying is that doesn't apply to everyone in the room. Those marginalized situations, they apply to a smaller group of people, and there has to be careful consideration given to those groups for sure. But for the most part, redirecting people to that majority stance and where the majority of people can thrive.
What would you say in response to people like Jessica Drake that argue that there's no such thing as porn addiction, or even that there's no such thing as sex addiction?
Well, the sex addiction claim is well documented and proven throughout research, and it's in the DSM. Pornography addiction is not in the DSM, and so that one, there's definitely a lot of debate about it. And my stance is not saying that people develop porn addictions. There's definitely people that for sure have porn addictions, but they're far and few. They're not the majority. But my emphasis in this presentation, the work I do, is the porn reliance that people develop. It's not an addiction. They're not going to have withdrawal symptoms, but it is going to become habitual and natural for them over time with use. So that's what I'm focusing on.
Kind of a follow-up to the first two questions. So, in support of what you're saying, when you look at frequency of pornography use, especially for men, the higher the use is correlated with lower relationship satisfaction. So on the one hand, but on the other hand, those effect sizes across studies tend to be relatively small, like correlations of 0.1 and 0.2. So I'm curious if you have speculations about why for some people porn use seems to be linked to lower relationship quality and for others it seems to go higher. Like, do you have speculations about why some people seem to be more prone to having negative effects and others seem to go on top?
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely thought about this. There's a couple of things relating to that. One, like in hookup culture, if people come from secure attachment families where they have a primary care provider that's in a secure attachment, they're gonna, on the immediate outset of hookup culture, they're gonna experience less problematic symptoms with hookup culture. They're coming from a secure environment. And so I think there's definitely some people that are coming from a secure environment and pornography use isn't going to initially be problematic for them. But over time, they will be conditioned, right? And it's going to cause different types of attachment issues with human beings. Another really important consideration that I did look at in the research, I didn't have time to cover every theme in the research that I conducted with women in porn, but another important one is relating to sex education. So because our sex education has failed us, because it never talked about the pleasure component of our sexuality, people didn't have a source to go to and they went to porn, right? Porn, friends, wherever, experimentation. And when you do that, of course, you're going to immediately experience higher levels of satisfaction, happiness, because you're being introduced to this area that every fiber in your being is wanting satisfied. And so, of course, if you haven't had exposure to that, like Jessica Drake talked about, if you lived in a home where it was no questions about sex, no questions about porn, you weren't going to look at anything related to sexuality, I would imagine most people, if they came from environments where their sexual questions and sexual urges and their sexual desires weren't even addressed, I would imagine they would experience a heightened sense of satisfaction when initially viewing porn. And I think that could continue for a period of time. And like I said, it's throughout time. It's once you get in these rabbit holes. It's once you start looking at porn that doesn't even align with your values or what you're hoping to achieve in your life, and you become conditioned to be attracted to that. With porn comes novelty as well. Most people aren't always looking at porn that is compatible with their sexual orientation or their desires or their attraction template. That's not what porn is for. Porn has not been developed within a scientific community where we're trying to achieve healthy, secure attachments. Porn has been constructed within a capitalistic model where people are just trying to make money off of you. So if they can get you hooked, they'll get you hooked. There's a lot of technical folks in Silicon Valley that have been coming out and talking about how they worked for Instagram, how they work for Facebook, and how Facebook isn't looking to increase your well-being. They're trying to get you hooked. They're setting up algorithms to get you hooked, to keep you coming back. That's what's happening with the internet age. And likewise, the porn industry is trying to do the same. So if they can get you hooked looking at bestiality porn, looking at child porn, looking at the many diverse ways that porn exists, they're going to do it because it's going to keep you coming back. Meanwhile, you're going to be building that oxytocin relationship, conditioning yourself, and probably developing patterns of desire that are not compatible with your values. And that's another huge theme that arose in the porn studies, which I did, where I had women that were engaging in pornography containing bestiality type content. Does everyone know what that is? Yeah. And child porn, things that conflicted with their values, things that started to make them feel very terrible about themselves simply because it appeared on the screen and became novelty to them and they just wanted to check it out. After a while, you become desensitized. You start clicking on whatever is available to you. And that's where it becomes an even bigger problem. Okay. Any other questions?
You mentioned
Mhm. Yeah.
marriage thing.
Yeah.
And that kind of conflicts a little bit with my understanding of like creating like a network of secure attachments that can meet different needs, and how there's something you could like touch on how like I don't know, because there's been research that shows that like you can kind of build like dependency relationships when you have all your kind of like all your stones in one bucket kind of thing. Not so that that's what marriage is, but the one's really secure attachment with one person.
Yeah. From what I know, the research that touches on that isn't necessarily saying that that's across the board and engaging in a monogamous relationship. Like I said, when we were talking about the different types of attachments, when you're in the realm of the other three, that's almost the majority of people. Almost the majority of people are experiencing some sort of insecure attachment at some point in their life. So if you're experiencing an anxious attachment, you're probably going to become highly dependent on that person for love. And in that case, if that's what you're experiencing in a monogamous relationship, that's the time that individuals really need to check in and go to therapy to get help on how to exist within a relationship without relying on that individual for every single need. But sexually, emotionally, it's important to have that strong attachment within a monogamous relationship.
Does anyone have one kick-ass